want the players to now understand that they work hard enough to enjoy good things happening to them. Like, you know what I mean? Go in and get the next goal and then enjoy yourselves. Don't wait for something bad to happen or sort of take their foot off the gas wondering like, well, this is going well, like suspiciously, right? Keep going, and go and really exert yourselves to the point of, not exert physically, but exert your dominance over the game to just put teams away, and expect that you're good enough to go and do that. I think that's the next little hill for us to climb, is that final belief, right? I think we believe we can compete with anybody. Now the next hurdle is to decide, yeah, we can go out and we got this, no problem.
Welcome to a new edition of the City Voice podcast. I am joined by another special guest. This time it's City 2 head coach, Bobby Murphy. Bobby, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
So before we get into it, we've got some very serious questions, little warm-up to the show. I need your honest answers very quickly. Favorite non-MLS team?
Spurs, Tottenham. It's a curse.
Yeah, I'm an Arsenal fan, so I was like, hot take on Lionel Messi to Inter Miami.
What percentage of all Apple MLS subscriptions did he get starting from yesterday moving forward? We were trying to figure out what percentage of those he got. We're guessing 15%.
15%?
Yeah.
You excited?
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I think it's exciting for the league. I think, it's anytime you can attract one of the biggest stars in the world to your league, I think it's a huge coup. And I think it's a credit to, not only the quality of the league, but still that people want to come and experience what living in the U.S. is like, and I think he's no different, I would imagine. So, yeah, I think it'd be great to see how it unfolds for sure.
Fantastic. Preferred dressing room anthem?
Oh, probably Everlong by the Foo Fighters.
Great stuff. Favorite coffee shop in St. Louis?
I don't get out much. So, favorite coffee shop in St. Louis? I'm usually here at home, so probably, yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, I went to one in Souliard. That's like a bookstore. It was nice. I can't remember what it was called.
Okay, we'll look that up.
All right.
Little miss.
All right.
Cheat meal.
My cheat meal, tacos for sure.
Weirdest thing you've had to find a player for?
Find a player for. Thinking back. Probably not wearing shoes.
Favorite MLS away game?
Well, I used to define that by hotels. So when I was at Orlando, for sure the W in Hoboken for Red Bull was a great stop. But I think the Northwest cities are all great. So I think Portland, Seattle, Vancouver, any one of those are just really great cities to go and visit. So,
and secret skill you have that your players might not know about?
We're pretty open with each other, but I think probably my trivia knowledge.
Trivia knowledge?
Yes. I'm usually quiz master on the road, so I do all the quiz nights with the team when we're on the road. So
it's secret skill. Okay, now we'll move into the main section of the podcast. We want to get to know a bit about you. Can you tell us where you grew up?
I was born in Tulsa, lived there for 4 years, and then moved to Denver for 4 years. But I grew up I consider Dallas home, Dallas, Texas. And
how were you introduced to soccer?
When I was in second grade, my dad, who played high school and college football and baseball, got a call from a tackle football coach wanting me to play because they saw me at recess. And he said no and put me on a soccer field and never looked back. So,
what position did you play?
Growing up, I used to be fast, believe it or not. So I played wide on the left because I was left-footed. And then as I got older, I moved as a holding midfielder, sort of a bodyguard.
Did you watch soccer growing up, or did you have a team that you supported? I mean, I know you mentioned Spurs at the...
Yeah, so we used to get one game a week. It was it was on PBS. It was the edited version. It was 1 hour. It would either be the English First Division or Soccer Made in Germany. And so that's how I fell in love with Tottenham. Just loved the white shirts and loved Glenn Hoddle and all those, and that growing up. So that's how I latched onto Tottenham as a youngster. But that was it in terms of being on TV. I would go to the old NASL games. So I remember going to the Colorado Caribou. I don't know if you remember the Caribou. You have to look them up. They had like the most iconic jerseys ever. They had fringe.
Yeah.
Where my dad taught in Denver, the Caribou actually trained. So I was like 7 or 8, and I'd go out and watch them train in the mornings in the summer and shag balls for them, and then moved to Dallas, and then we would go to Dallas Tornado games in the old NASL, and then the pro game sort of died out in the 80s, and then indoor became big. So we would go to the Dallas Sidekicks games, which were a big hit. And, I think they sell out, get 18, 19,000 people games. So that was as much like real soccer as you could, live soccer as you could get. But then going to like universities, watching SMU play in Dallas and stuff. So just trying to seek it out as much best I could.
And what level did you play to?
I actually made it to the old USL. So played in university, played at Clemson for 2 years, and then transferred to what is now Southern New Hampshire University. It was New Hampshire College at the time. And then played for New Hampshire and Boston in the old USL. And then I think I was like 25 with one child and another one on the way. And it's kind of time to be responsible.
Was that a decision to move into coaching and to get badges? Like what was that?
Coaching, my dad was a coach. He was a teacher. He was an educator and a coach. And so right after college, I was chasing a girl and moved to the mountains of New Hampshire, like north of where we were, and latched on as a college assistant, a part-time college assistant, and just fell in love with it. And she was super supportive of that. And, I did a lot of jobs to support, I called it a lot of jobs to support my coaching habit until I got a chance to do it full time. So I ran a snowboard shop. I did construction, built houses. I cooked in a diner. So just anything I could to keep myself coaching while supporting a young family until I got my break at 30 when I got a full-time coaching job. And we had a deal. She and I actually had a deal that if I didn't get a full-time coaching job by 30, that I would put that on the back burner and find a real profession or something, and so that we could just kind of settle down into a normal life.
You were on the buzzer.
I was right there. So just under the wire.
What connected you to coaching in that way? What do you love about coaching that makes it so addictive to you?
At the time, I think I think it's changed over time. I think initially it was still being a part of the game and just afraid to let that part of me go. I've seen it in my own children whose identity is wrapped up in being a soccer player, and then when that's taken away, that can be a little disorienting. I see it with a lot of kids, but for me, it was. One, I love being a part of the game. Two, seeing people get better and just helping people along, and that being a vehicle to do it. And then it became a challenge to see, how good I was at this, and that sort of led to the jump to MLS when I got the chance years ago, and to see if I'm as good as I think I am at this, or hoped I was. And then today, it's kind of come full circle now. It's the ability to help these young men, some pro, some trying to be pro, down their path, and to really take satisfaction in their not only their current success, but what their potential may be and what lies ahead for them. So that's it.
So what was your first break? Specifically, what was the role? Where was it?
It was in Austin. We were living in Maine at the time. I was a college coach, but it was a part-time college job. It paid you I want to say our last year before I got a full-time coaching job on my W-2. I think I made $17,000, and that was with 3 kids. And then I became the director of coaching for South Texas Youth Soccer Association. So that was based just outside Austin. So I was the coach in charge of all the coaches, in charge of the 100,000 youth players in South Texas.
That sounds like a monstrous undertaking.
Yeah, it was. It was the challenge was, because it had to do with like ODP, which was really important back at the time, coaching education, overall player development. But what I found after 2 or 3 years in that job was you're not really coaching, you're administrating, you know, and there's a difference. And I think the challenge for me is, and I think anyone who's been in those jobs finds, you lose contact with what's going on in people's day-to-day coaching lives, whether it's coaching kids or whatever, because you're in your ivory tower and trying to dictate policies to them that should work, but you really have no idea what their daily struggles are. So I don't know that was a great role for me. So after about 3 years, it was time to move on to what was next.
Where did you move next?
I was actually recruited to go to St. Stephen's Episcopal School in Austin. It is a day in boarding school in Austin that had, back in the 90s, boarding schools were really taking a hit. So they developed some specialized academies to try and fill beds. And so they had a soccer academy. So they asked me to come in and run that. So, and it was a great opportunity because with my other job, the kids were starting to get old enough to ask, like, where are you going now? Because Texas is a big place and a lot of travel. And so this is a chance to move on campus. We had a house on campus. The kids got tuition at the school for free, and we were able to sort of be a family and run around and enjoy developing players in a pretty highly charged academic setting. So it was really satisfying.
How many teams would you look after?
In that sense, it was just sort of a boys team and a girls team because we would have probably 20 boys and 20 girls. They would play club soccer as well. Like we sort of outsourced that part to a local club, but they'd play their own independent schedule. And we made a really conscious choice that we would only play teams that were better than us. We played a lot of men's teams because you're 14 playing against a 24, 25-year-old. You have to use a different skill set than just your athleticism. We would take them places that were really sort of foreign to them to have them deal with adversity. So we'd take them down to the Rio Grande Valley down along the border to play games down there. We'd take them to Mexico and play, all just to try and help them along. And I think I was really proud of the success we had. I think we had, at one stretch, 5 or 6 MLS draft picks come through there, which was pretty great.
That innovative approach to developing players, is that something that you pride yourself on? Is that part of your toolkit, would you say?
I think so. I think it's, but I don't think there's a real secret to developing players. I mean, I think it's all like, all the soccer part of it's on YouTube. Really, you can look that stuff up. I think the challenge is, and I've even had this challenge here, during my short time here, where if you get in the way, you can't help them on their way, and so as adults, we have to allow them the space to fail, allow them to feel safe in failing, allow to then pick up the pieces and move forward, and not take that stuff personally. I know, there was a stretch here where things weren't going great, early on. I mean, they were fine, but they weren't great. And, I'm very passionate about what I do. And through some conversations with some people who know me really well, when things don't go well and you're passionate about it, you sort of take that personally, if that makes sense. And I was taking some things personally that had nothing to do with me. and so you start getting in the way of trying to manipulate and manufacture results that don't need to be manufactured, instead of just allowing this process to unfold. And so I think the challenge in developing players is having the courage of your convictions to stand by them. A lot of people say they want to do things and then they don't do them. I know I've done it, but so now it's just one, having the soccer acumen and the teaching ability to teach and all those things are really important, but it's also, I think, the ability to just stand back and let it unfold and be patient and take time and care about them more. Soccer's the easy part. They're young men with lots going on in their lives and lots of pressures that we may not know about on the surface, and taking the time to try and get to know them and show them a lot of love and guidance and let them know that to be brave enough to do their best, because whatever the outcome is, the outcome's going to be okay. There's always another side to that river you're going to cross. You don't even know what that other side is going to look like. It might even be better than what you could imagine. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there, because then that's a whole different discussion than, yeah, you did your best and your best was good enough or it wasn't good enough. The trying to get you to do your best is a different discussion that's much harder to have.
You went from you went into a school to run their academy. Is being surrounded by people in the education game, did that influence any of your coaching? Like, you've gone from very football focused, very soccer focused environment to a more educational environment where soccer is part of it. Do you lean into the expertise of like teachers that were there? Does that play any role?
I'm sure it did. I'm sure that there were people that I watched run classes and that were much smarter than I am. And I'm sure that had an effect. I think the other challenge we had was trying to get a really high level academic environment to embrace the fact that kids can be well-rounded, and that they have, they may not make A's in your class, but they bring value to this community in a different way. And we have to allow for that. And so I actually taught some classes just to bridge gaps with faculty members. I taught a freshman world history class. I actually taught a class on why soccer matters, a senior elective, for a year or two. And so really just trying to get people to recognize that their talent may not be in algebra, but that's okay, because they have this other talent which will open doors for them down the road. And, excuse me, I can support them one way, but you got to help support them the other way. And so I think those were some interesting discussions at times with faculty members.
According to the internet, you spent 13 years there. So
probably
must have enjoyed your time. What were the key things that you learned during that period that helped you make the jump into MLS?
Yeah, well, the thing that, during that time, I also worked with the Austin Aztecs, which were a USL team. That's where I met up with Adrian, and I was Adrian Heath's assistant, who's at Minnesota now, but he brought me to Orlando. But, what I loved about that school, and I still love about that place, is it was a community that was based, and I could get my facts wrong, but I want to say it was the first voluntarily integrated boarding school west of the Mississippi. I believe also that it was the first co-ed boarding school west of the Mississippi. And our founding bishop prided himself, his reason for founding the school was after the horrors of World War II. He believed that if he could bring children from rural Texas to this place and teach them to be citizens of the world, that he would be doing his part to make sure the atrocities of World War II would never happen again. So he marched with Martin Luther King. So the social justice aspect of it is really important to me. The fact that my kids were exposed to that and went to that school and found out that that they aren't the center of the universe, that there's a lot in this world to be grateful for. There's a lot in this world to open your eyes to. My middle child, the students of St. Stephen's self-fund an Episcopal school in the interior of Haiti. So the students themselves fundraise to donate to help fund this school. And every spring break, we send a group down. And my son was fortunate enough to go one year and spend 2 weeks in the interior of Haiti. And that's life-changing. Like he went down one kid and came back a different kid. And his level of gratitude for everything was greatly altered for the better. So I think that's, that idealism that we can help make young people aware of their world around them, that they can go out and be real contributors to it. I'm super proud that 4 alumni from there, 3 of which played for me there, just founded the first women's USLW team in Austin. And none of them are over the age of 28.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, that's just a little thing. There's so many ways these kids that went through that school have contributed in a really wonderful way. And it was great for my kids, you know. So part of this, the attraction of staying there was letting my kids have this education. It was not something I could have afforded, you know, on a normal soccer coach's salary. But yeah, I'm really grateful for that.
Did you ever see yourself making the jump into MLS? Was that at the back of your mind? I would love to do that. How can I get into it? Or did it?
A little bit, because I had a relationship with Adrian that lasted for the 3 years that the Aztecs were in Austin, that later became Orlando City. Summers, I would go back to Orlando and stay at his house and hop right back into training. You know, I always hoped. You just never know. But you never know what you're hoping for. I was getting restless at St. Stephen's, like it was time for me for whatever was next, and he called and I made the jump and was really excited and terrifying all at the same time, because I went from coaching my daughter, who's a pretty good player, or other kids, you know, and the next thing I know, I'm talking to Kaká. You know, and that's a jump.
That's a name.
That's a jump.
Name.
And so really working hard to make sure that what I did with all those players had value to them, and trying to make sure training was meaningful. And it was like, at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, that was worth my time. And so it was a real challenge, and I embraced it and I enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. I think coaching at this level, like, it's one of those things that you love it, but then you're like, what am I doing this for? You know, and then when the minute the season ends, you're like, when does preseason start? You know, it's like one of these things that's like infectious, and you don't know if it's give or take. And I think the one thing I've learned is to find balance in my life with all of this. I think the greatest thing to happen to me in Orlando was getting fired.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you think you're so wrapped up in all this stuff. But you know what? After I got fired, my kids still love me, which is important. You know, the people around me still care about me, and I still have to find a way to move forward in this world with a smile on my face. So I think there's a freedom in going through that once, and I'm sure it won't be the last time. But
yeah, a lot of people say that being fired is sometimes the best way to sort of cleanse your mind and put perspective.
I firmly believe it. You know, because you knew you were going to get fired when they hired you, right? They hire you to fire you.
Yeah.
But then when it happens, you're like, wait, me? Seriously? You know, and then, you know, you go through your little like phase of, you know, stomping around the house, and then you're like, oh, the sun's going to come up and I still have to get on with things and find a way to make do. And so
there's always another opportunity for good people.
I hope so.
So we went straight to the fired bit, Orlando, but you bounced around inside Orlando. You had lots of different roles. Do you want to talk through some of those roles? Yeah,
I mean, I was brought in to be the first team assistant, and the academy was just taking shape to sort of be, and then to sort of be a liaison between the academy and the first team. And so, so I was there with the first team, and then after 6 months, Adrian got let go, and so then I had to become interim head coach, which was a real challenge. I mean,
crisis management, right?
Yeah, it is. And it's, you know, and at the same time, you learn real quick about the business nature of this, because, you know, when I had gotten the news and they asked me to be interim coach, I said, I don't know, I'll have to call you back. And I immediately called Adrian. And I'm like, do you want me to quit too? He's like, no, you have to keep getting paid. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you quit, they don't pay you. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I learned real quick, like, it's not personal. Like, for him, he wanted the best for me, which was to keep getting paid. And you know, so you go into this and you do the best you can. And I remember the first knock on the door after the news had broke the next day was Kaká. So there's a testing conversation right there. You know, the next was Julio Baptista, the Beast, who wore number 10 at Real Madrid. Yep. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to have a talk. And then the last was Antonio Nocerino, who played for Italy and AC Milan, and he wanted to have it. So all of a sudden it almost felt like, what's the dinosaur, Jurassic Park, when they keep hitting the thing to find the weak spots. Yeah. So they were testing the fence to find the weak spots. And then you just do the best you can. Like you know, and I think I was really grateful to the support staff I had there, Anthony Pulis and Stuart Kerr. They were super helpful. And I think you have to look at it from a perspective of like you're stewarding a club and you're trying to patch this thing back together. There's hurt there. There's frustration. There's all these things. And can you just patch it together and leave it in a little bit better spot for the next guy who comes along? Which I think we did. And then Jason came in, and I was grateful that Jason kept me around, Jason Kreis, and we were together and for 2 years, and then he got let go, and then the new coach came in, and I was supposed to stay, and he let me go, and that was that. So, yeah, it was a lot. But it was a great learning experience. I think what I learned is be yourself.
Yeah.
The minute like the title changes, if I start acting differently, I immediately lose credibility because I'm not being genuine. And you just, it's like anything else in this world. Like you make the best choice you can in those moments with with the information you have, and whether they were right or wrong, I don't know. But I enjoyed it, and I loved Orlando. I loved the club, what it stood for. Remember being there during the Pulse shooting was really hard. But I was really proud of the club and the way the club stepped up in the community, and and to see what's going on in Florida now is really on the heels of what the city went through and everything else is really sort of sad and frustrating. But it is what it is. But I'm really proud of the club, that the club took stances in tough moments and led from the front with what Phil and Kay Rollins, the original owners' beliefs were, and we made no apologies about it. And I think that's pretty unique in the American landscape, that they really were, from my understanding, children of baby boomers of who came from Stoke and were the benefits of Labor Party policies, and that's who they were, and they weren't going to apologize for any of it, and that's who we were as a club, and fair enough.
So you had quite a turbulent ups and downs. Orlando managed some incredible players, had some big moments. What was the thinking behind the next move after? How did that come about?
I actually took a year off. I hit like sort of a personal bottom, just in the way I'd kind of lived my life a little bit. And so really took a year to try and become a better parent to my adult children, to be more present for them and really kind of look after myself a little bit. Went back to Austin and really needed that time. And then money starts running out and you're like, oh, I need a job. So I was fortunate enough to land with the Dynamo down at RGV as an assistant, like last minute, like it just popped up and it happened. And living down there I spent a lot of time in the Valley, but living down there, it's an interesting community. It's sort of like this half between world. It's weird to have to drive through a border checkpoint 60 miles inside the U.S. border to get to there. It's just this weird little buffer zone between U.S. and Mexico. But really great people, really kind and loving. And then COVID hit and then the Dynamo changed everything. And so then it was like scramble mode again. And it was time to move to Omaha. So I took that and what a great little club Union Omaha is. Like, I'm super proud of what we did there. Winning the league, having a cup run to the quarterfinals. Jay Mims was a great leader of that club at the time. He deserves a lot of credit for his vision. The greatest gift of, I'll say with all the soccer stuff, the greatest gift of Omaha was that my daughter was really struggling. She had graduated from college and was just sort of struggling. I don't know if it was COVID or her or kids like just not really prepared to move on into the real world. And I asked her if she wanted to come live with me, and her brothers coaxed her into it. And having 2 years with my daughter was the greatest gift of that time, for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was just amazing.
Was it special to have them here when that draw happened in the Open Cup?
Yeah,
it was, my word.
Yeah, it was great. You know, I mean, it would have been nice it would have been. I was happy for the players that were still there that I knew to get to come and get to play in a big stadium again.
Great attendance, a record-breaking attendance.
Yeah, and to get another chance at it, because I think last year on our Cup run, we played at Chicago in Soldier Field in front of probably 3,000 people. Then we moved on to play at Minnesota and probably in front of 5,000. And then when we got to Kansas City in the quarterfinals, fair play, I give Kansas City tons of credit. Like, they fully promoted the game. I think we traveled 3,000 to 4,000, and it was a sellout at Kansas City. And our guys were just, I just couldn't even believe, some of them never played anything like that. And so to get a second chance, it's an opportunity like that to where you can not be overwhelmed by it, but enjoy it. For those guys, it was great. And they came down during preseason. We played them with my group, and it's just a good little club. Omaha's a great little soccer city. And so I hope that they I know they're working on a stadium. I hope that the legislature comes through for them and helps them get a stadium downtown, because I think that's something that could be a really marquee club in USL for sure.
So moving on, how did the relationship with St. Louis City SC come about?
I'd known Bradley when he was at Red Bull. I had known John Hackworth for 20 years, and it was just sort of conversations back and forth. Would this be something I'd be interested in? Absolutely. Had an interview, and finally got the call asking if this would be something that I would be interested in doing and moving down, right around the 1st of December, I think. And I was super excited to get the call. I think, and I told them, and then I'll say it again, you get to be old enough, you find out probably what you're best at. I think there were years in my career where I was guided by ambition, if that makes sense. Like, how good am I? How good? And then I reach a point where, and I think my time in Omaha was really crystallizing for that. Like, I was making very little money. I was living my daughter and I were sharing like a little duplex, and it was some of the happiest times of my life. You know what I mean? So you're like, oh, wait a minute. So what makes me happy? It's working with these young ones. What are you good at? I have a history of and so it's sort of like that, right? I don't know what the word is, but like the nexus of what I enjoy and what I'm good at come together, and this is it, and this is the job, and I get to do it. So not only do I get to do it, right? I get to do it in a new club that is in a really exciting soccer city. That's, the ownership has been unbelievably supportive in all of our endeavors. And so I think, I feel like I've won the lottery, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? And the people ask you, what's the old interview question? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? I think, hopefully doing this. You know what I mean? I don't need to go chasing first team stuff ever again. I've done it. I want happiness in my life, and being with those young players, it makes me happy.
Was there like a sales pitch to you? Like, what was the, how did the process go? I mean, I guess if you've known John Hackworth for 20 years, and Bradley, like, it's less of an interview, but how did that go?
I mean, I think the big thing for me was going to a place where, like, John's one of the best people I've ever met in my life. Just like, you know what I mean? Just like a good guy. And Bradley's the same way. And so they're going to only surround themselves hopefully with good people. So to be able to walk into a situation where there's good people, like, that makes it all the much easier. So that was super attractive. That was the most attractive thing to me. Not the stadium, not the training ground, right? That you're going to be working with people who share a vision, who are good people, that all want the best for each other. You know, and I've been in clubs where that's not always the case. You know, people are always, you know, the old whispers and what's going to happen to me. And, you know, I think to go to a place where you get to, you're happy to see everyone every morning and say good morning and work together. And that's a gift, you know, that not a lot of people get to, no matter what profession you're in. I don't know. I don't know how common that is. So I feel really lucky.
You're very well traveled, lived in a lot of different places. You moved to St. Louis. What are your impressions of the city?
You know, I think it's really interesting. You know, I live down south and I bought a house off WhatsApp videos.
Really?
Yeah.
That is bold.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. My realtor girl, she was great. She had a sense of my aesthetic, and so she was like, "I think this is your house." And I was like, "All right, I'm in." But I think amazing in what pride people have in their city, right? And so you have that here for sure. I think all the different little pockets of you know, ethnic groups and little neighborhoods and this, that, and the other is pretty great. You know, I think I almost get this. I don't know anything about it, but I get the sense that like this could be the next place to sort of take off, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like you're one or two big companies from being like, how much does it cost to buy a house here? All right, we're moving here. You know what I mean? And then this place just takes off and blows up because it's got everything.
Good food, good parks.
Yeah,
sport.
The parks are unbelievable.
Sport,
yeah. The sport. Yeah, and so I feel like this is. You know, and I said this after living in Omaha. I think people not from the Midwest sort of sleep on the Midwest a little bit because I thought Omaha was a great city. I think this is a bigger version, sort of similar. So yeah, I've enjoyed it so far.
And how have you mentioned the facilities weren't the most important thing, but you know, I see you roll into the training complex, meet the players. Like, do you like working in this environment? You know, especially because you've been, you know, you've spanned the gamut of.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think the facilities are great. To be able to have all the support I have from you, not to mention, you know, the support for every other team in the club, but for my team, you know, to have all the support we have, whether it's in terms of staffing, equipment, the fact that the club wants to, you know, provide my guys 2 meals a day, you know, that's huge. That's, you know, a lot of places don't do that. You know, I feel really, really lucky to have the support that we have. So I think it's really fantastic.
With regards to the playing style, you know, Bradley, Lutz, and John, they've got a very prescriptive style of how they want the game to be played. Did that suit your coaching style, or do you download what that playing style is and then you adapt to whatever the club in front of you wants?
Yeah, it wasn't dissimilar to what we did in Omaha. But I think what I had to do was really get up to speed with the language, the vocabulary. I learned this, you know, that so many soccer people have their own vernacular. And so I could say one thing and you'd use a different word and we're talking about the same thing, and that only leads to confusion with the players. So having a common language, getting up to speed with that, getting up to the speed of the nuance of the system we want to do here, you know, because I think from the outside, you know, my dad watches it and he's like, you guys play really hard. Yeah, well, there's nuance to how we play hard, you know, and there's cues to how we play hard. And so not just thinking we just roll it out there and we just go chase things down, right? There's much more to it than that. And so, no, for sure I had to learn and I had to adapt, but it's not something, it's a style and a system that I believe in. And I'm grateful to, like, you know, John and Bradley, who've walked me through some things and helped me, you know, when I have a question. They always have the time, you know, and I think you know, the biggest compliment I get is I got a text the other night after Tacoma, Bradley saying he really enjoyed watching that. So I think we're on the right path a little bit here. So
like day one, we spent last year watching City 2 have a fantastic season under John Hackworth. You walk into the dressing room, there's some players that were there before, there's a bunch of new people, there's a lot of youth in the system. Like, what does a day one look like for a new coach in a new club?
You know, it was just trying to get to know everybody, try and get to know, even before day one happened, I went and had coffee and snacks with the returning players, because I could see how being here last year and being the team to then becoming the second team, that can have an impact.
Mm-hmm.
That can be jarring, and so just to make sure that they were all okay with that, and if there's anything they wanted to get off their chest, let's do it now. Because going from having the run of the building to then having to make way for the first team, you're like, wait a minute, but that's just the way it is. And then getting to know the new players, trying to make sure they get settled, getting to know the academy kids, and trying to find that balance of how we're gonna slowly integrate academy players into this and not do it too quickly, to allow them to still have success at the academy while still getting exposed to this. So day one was really like it was a whirlwind. The first couple of weeks, just trying to get a handle on everything, and I think we were lucky that the first team started about 2 weeks before we did, so we got the chance to sort of kind of observe and just get the lay of the land. And there's a lot of asking for forgiveness, I'm sure, because we probably stepped on some toes at some point. But yeah, I think we've got it down to a system now, so we're all right.
Do you think some of your experience that you mentioned earlier, where you would take younger teams and play them against older teams, do you think some of the lessons that you learned are being pulled through into this team? Because like our City 2 team has a lot of youth. I mean, like very young players, like playing against older players, right? Almost like reserve team players for other clubs.
Yeah, but I think that goes back to what I talked about earlier when I sort of got myself in the way. You know what I mean? Because you want those young ones to do so well, right? Or you want, it's not even like you want them to do well. You want the team to do well. And so then all of a sudden you're not allowing for the mistakes to happen, or you're trying to micromanage this or that or the other. And so I think it's coming back to me. It's been a while since I've worked with players this age, but I think, so much of it is the best way to probably describe it is, if you ever go to a youth game and you have there's a kid who's just not any good. He's just not any good. It's no problem. He's just not any good. He's like 6, and his parents are yelling at him like it's a reflection on their parenting that he's not any good. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you're a bad parent. You just can't play soccer. And so, I can almost do the same thing with our academy players or our young players, thinking that it's a reflection on me. I'm a bad coach because they're making mistakes. Well, no, they're supposed to make mistakes. That's part of it. It's not a reflection. Shut up and get out of the way and be helpful. Mm-hmm. So I think the biggest, I think what I've had to be reminded of is I'm best when I'm of service to my players. And as long as I can stay in that little sweet spot of being of service and useful to them, then we'll be okay.
You're 5 points of second, I believe. Just double checking my maths. Five points of second. I don't look at the standings this season. How do you feel it's going from a playing perspective, and do you feel that you can push further up the table? Is that
Yeah, I think we got off to a really good start, but didn't get results, and then there was a little dip in confidence, and I think there was, and at that point, my fear, right, not for myself but for the group, was I understand this isn't about winning, but at the same time, to keep them ticking over and to keep them engaged and keep them going, they've got to get something, right? So there's got to be they feel like there's some sort of reward, and I feel like when we got that result at Colorado, the players were fantastic. It was a 0-0 game. We won on penalties, and they were top of the league by a mile at that point. That was a turning point for us that, okay, we can do this. And now, we've played all the big boys in the league. I think Tacoma's up there. We played them twice, and had good results, good performance, and a good result. We've got Austin coming again for the second time, which will be difficult. But I think the challenge now for them, and we talked about it today, right? And we did really well at Tacoma, even North Texas. We get up to a 2-0 lead, right? And I want the players to now understand that they work hard enough to enjoy good things happening to them. You know what I mean? Go in and get the next goal, and then enjoy yourselves. Don't wait for something bad to happen, or sort of take their foot off the gas, wondering well, this is going well, suspiciously, right? Keep going, and go and really exert yourselves to the point of, not exert physically, but exert your dominance over the game to just put teams away, and expect that you're good enough to go and do that. And I think that's the next little hill for us to climb, is that final belief, right? I think we believe we can compete with anybody. Now the next hurdle is to decide, yeah, we can go out and we've got this, no problem. We talked about the other day, confidence. I think John Calipari said there's two types of confidence. There's the confidence that someone tells you how great you are, which is not real because they can take it away from you as well. But there's also the confidence of knowing that I've done this every day. I've seen this before. I know how to solve this, and I'm going to go and get it done. And that's the transition we're making into that unwavering belief in themselves that, yeah, I got this. So, and I think you see that with the first team. I mean, they just walk around like they own the place, and that's half the battle at times,
Yeah.
So, good for them.
You mentioned that Bradley watched the game the other night. He spoke glowingly about having a City 2 side last year and what it can do for development players in the club. How close is your working relationship with him, and does he see players and he wants to talk to you about them?
Yeah, I think we're close. I think he personally put our office next to his, so that just in terms of proximity, that there's always going to be interaction. I think they keep an eye on what we're doing to the extent that you see somebody like Johnny Klein getting an opportunity. Christian has been called into first team training. I think there'll be a few others that get opportunities. So, and then I think he trusts us enough to send the guys down to get minutes, and I think, that's been a challenge for me, is to build trust with those first team guys who come down, that this is not an indictment on your ability or anything else. It's just an opportunity. We're going to spend 24 hours together, and it's going to be great, and you're going to get minutes, and these are good guys and good players. And so building that sort of trust with first team players has been a priority of mine, so that when they come down, they feel integrated into the group right away. So I think we have a really good relationship. And I think John and I have a really good working relationship, and we talk daily about players and this, that, and the other, and training ideas and everything else.
Do you spend much time scouting the wider academies? Are you keeping your eye on what's coming through? And
Yes, primarily the 17s. And so I think we've got we've got the UPSL group, which is the U19s. A lot of them will be moving on to university in the fall. But those staying behind, plus the 17s, I think there'll be hopefully 4 or 5 that'll make the jump from either UPSL or U17s straight into the City 2 group for the rest of this year and for next year. So I think we really want to, I think we all have to remember that this is year 2 of this, or year 1, really. I've considered this year 1 for everybody being in this, working together and having us at all levels. And so we're still figuring it out, but I think we want to get younger at the City 2 level, really give these young guys opportunities and hopefully, get them pushed onto the first team in due course. But I think, I'm really excited. We're really excited. I think the club is excited about 3 or 4 of the young ones that are coming through, for sure.
I know that you probably can't mention names individually, but just for the fan base to get them hyped about watching City 2, are there some players outside the ones that we've seen? I mean, we've seen Johnny Klein go up. Are there any other players that you think, listen, there's a chance that they could make their way into the first team at some point? Yeah,
I think Michael Wenzel, for sure. Michael's been great. He's an interesting story. His dad was a guest professor at Penn State, and he was actually born here and lived here for 8 weeks before he went back to Germany. So he's a U.S. citizen, but he grew up in Germany. He's 20. He's made the choice to come over here. So I think he's got a future. I think Faisal's been fantastic for us. Faisal, I give him a lot of credit. He had 14 appearances for QPR at 21, so that's not bad.
Right.
But they kind of said, your time here's up, and his agent called and asked if he could come over on trial. I said, I've been in the building for like 6 hours. Like, I'm not asking for money to fly. You know what I mean? And he bet on himself. Like, he paid his. We worked out a deal that if we end up signing, we'd reimburse him for his. So he came over for 2 weeks on trial on his own dime, and I'm really proud of him and the
Do you respect that hustle because you went through it yourself?
Yeah, and like he's betting on himself. So you got to like anybody who's betting on themselves. So, and so I think, he's still young at 20, 21, 22. So I think those two have been really good. I think, I still think like the next challenge for Ezra is like getting out of City 2. I think Ezra's got so much ability. He's got a great mentality. It's just getting that consistency every day. And I think he's got a real chance to move forward. And then the young ones, that you don't see very much, but like Fritz, Fritz is going to Northwestern in 6 weeks, but he's just competes and does the best he can and gets better all the time. And, his willingness to work, his heading wasn't great. And, he had 61, I think he was supposed to be 60, but he wanted to do one more just to do one more to improve his heading. As a center back, you have to, especially in our system where you're going to press people, they're going to hit big balls at you. You got to be able to head it. And then you watch him in games now, you're like, that works. Amazing. Practice works. He's been great. Christian, I had at Omaha last year as a goalkeeper. He was only in for like a month and we needed a goalkeeper, and to see how far he's come in a short time has been fantastic. So, there's so many other stories. Caden's not finally, that's unfair. Caden's 16, but Caden's growing into this role, at the next level. I think at U17 level, he's pretty dominant, but now he's playing against men, and now it's a different challenge for him, and he's learning and growing every day. But there's so many of them behind the scenes that you don't see. Like a Josh Mayer who graduated high school early and is taking a gap year so he can get better here. And Josh has realized that just little things, like he runs funny. So now he's like, if I can improve my running, maybe I can gain a half step of, and so he's doing all those things. So there's so many different little side stories that people don't see of these guys who are just desperate to go as far as they can, but just make the club proud and make the city proud of them. They're pretty remarkable young men.
It's remarkable that people that young can have focus that's needed to make it at the elite level. Like they have the sacrifices they have to make. I mean, we just spoke to Jared Stroud. He said, that it's the work in the dark that people don't notice.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And I think the challenge to counter that is, as adults, we have to, I don't know if protect them from themselves is the right way to say it, but keep exposing them to the world that's outside of the bubble that is our game. There's there's a whole big world out there that's worth poking your nose into, and we try and do that with them on trips. We try and get them out because we go to so many remarkable places to see things. And it was funny the other day in Tacoma, we had a night off, and so I told them I would take them out to dinner, and they voted to go for Ethiopian food.
Very nice.
Well, yeah, I was excited, but then you've got these kids they wouldn't know Ethiopia. They just don't know any better. They don't know it, and so to see them really walk into this little Ethiopian restaurant in Tukwila, Washington, owned by these two brothers, and the music's playing, and they lay out the food, and there was a little waitress there who explained what each thing was to them and how to do it, and to see them embrace that. All right, I'm going to eat with my hands, and we're going to do it, and and that's just. Probably I should have taken them for grilled chicken and steamed vegetables. You know what I mean? But I just think at their young age, life's to be lived, and soccer takes up a lot of their time. But if we can get them to be as well-rounded and curious about the world around them, then I think whatever their soccer outcome is, we're all for the better for that. So
Ethiopian jazz is amazing.
Yes.
By the way,
Yes.
Throw a little bit of that on Spotify. It is it's a great vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, like the success of players that are getting access to the first team and are getting noticed, like that must give a big whoosh of motivation to these guys when they say, "Wow, like this could be me if I put in the effort."
Yeah, and I think, so I think I give credit to the first team staff, right, for recognizing and rewarding players for doing well and giving them an opportunity, because that's what we said we were going to do, and they've as a club, and so they've stuck to their word, and so now, anybody, it's the people we have in the building now, yes, but if you fast forward it 2 years, 3 years, right, this becomes the hallmark of this place, and now you attract from a wider pool because you have credibility with players that, yeah, if you're good enough, you're old enough, and we'll give you an opportunity. And I think that's it's a brave stance for a club to take. But I think it can be really fulfilling and rewarding for everybody involved.
What are your hopes for the rest of the season?
I think if we can get into the playoffs, would be great. And then I think once we get in there, we're not afraid of anybody. I think that's like sort of a team sort of thing. I think to get a few more guys some opportunities, whether it's even just in training with the first team, and just get them that exposure. And then to really sort of open the door at the other end for these academy kids whose season's wrapping up in the next few weeks. Give them a couple weeks off and before they come back in with us and let them see where they're at. So I think it's just, on a team level is to get into the playoffs. But I think for the players, it's just to continue developing and building and exposing them to new challenges.
This you play home matches at City Park. It's a great place for families to come down with young children. There's more space. It's a little bit different to the Saturday night games or the Wednesday night games of the first team. Would you be able to give a little elevator pitch as to what could families, young people that have never experienced soccer and the City experience, what can they expect if they come down to watch your guys play?
One from like an experience standpoint, I think it's pretty remarkable that you can come to this venue at a really affordable rate, like the same price as going to a movie, I think, and get to see the stadium where it might be out of reach for a family of four, who doesn't have season tickets or whatever. So I think that's a huge plus. Two, I think what you'll see is sort of in the truest, purest sense, like young people who want to strive and achieve something, giving their very best, and I think my dad always said this when he was coaching, like he just loved watching young people compete. There's something about young people competing and overcoming challenges and obstacles and winning or losing, and how they respond and react. And, and so I think you get to see the future, before it happens in this club. But to see those see our players, they play hard, they give their best. And so I think that's always, and what's better human drama than that?
That is a fantastic sales pitch. But anybody,
I don't know how tall the building was in the elevator.
No, that was great, Bobby. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It was brilliant to understand your journey. Great to hear like some of your managerial principles, and it's brilliant seeing you doing the work that you're doing at the club. If you are listening to this on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, give it a 5-star review. Say something nice about Bobby because he might come back towards the end of next season and talk about the success that he's having. And on that note, we'll say thank you for joining the show.
I'm very grateful. This was fun.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
Ciao for now.
Mm-hmm.